Hello, everyone. Welcome. I hope that your second day of DrupalCon Europe is off to a great start. This is the Drupal.org panel. So we are here to talk about Drupal.org, about the work the engineering team of the Drupal Association does, and about how we support everything that all of you do on Drupal.org to build Drupal and all your feature requests, and how we recognize your contributions. So I'll go through some introductions here. I like to start off every version of this session with this slide just to show you some of the names and faces involved. Some of us are here today, some of us are not. Top row is all Drupal Association staff. And look at that, we're all here. So you'll recognize these names and faces. I'll have people introduce themselves in a moment. The bottom row are some of our contractor volunteer folks who help with infrastructure, security, all sorts of things. So a big thank you to them. And if you see them around, you can say thanks as well. We'll run through some real quick introductions. So I'm Tim Lennon, Hestenet on Drupal.org. I'm the CTO here at the Drupal Association, and I'll sort of be leading our panel and prompting folks to jump in where they can. Neil, why don't you introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, Neil Drum. I do some of the planning, the site building, focusing more on the Drupal side usually, and then some work on Drupal Steward as well.
Awesome. Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, Ryan Aslett, Mixologic on Drupal.org. I manage the Drupal CI that powers all of our testing, and built packages.drupal.org that runs all of our composer stuff, and generally keep my hands in a lot of like developer tooling support kind of things as well.
Awesome, great. Let's see, I'll go in the picture order of the slide. So Brandon, why don't you go next?
Yeah, apologies for the terrible microphone. I'm Brendan with Drupal Association, developer here, feature development on Drupal.org.
Awesome, thank you, B. And Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel, community liaison. I'm not part of the engineering team. I'm actually in the ops team. And I'm the one that keeps raising tickets saying, can you just something?
And getting those feature requests, yes. Rachel,
yeah.
As it says in the title, what Rachel does is kind of consolidate those things from you out there in the community that you need or would like to see on Drupal.org and help us decide how to get them put together. So some quick thank yous as we go through. First of all, we have a number of infrastructure partners who support us. I won't go through all their names, but these are organizations that either provide sort of personnel support or gratis services or discounted services that the Drupal Association uses to do things like, our CDN service, bot protection, hosting, introspection, all of those sorts of things that we need. We're also working right now with a number of partners on sort of contract development work for key initiatives. So these are just a few of the folks who we have various kinds of partnerships going on with to bring some new things to Drupal.org over the course of the next 12 months or so, and more to come. We also, as you'll hear about a little bit more, have a team of folks coming together to help augment the engineering staff so that we can focus on some of the initiatives that we'll talk about today. I think one of the first things I wanted to jump into, because it's probably top of mind for lots of folks, is Drupal 8 and supporting the end-of-life process. So as you may or may not be aware, Drupal 8 is going to be end-of-life as of November 2nd of this year. So it's coming up on us quite quickly. And the good news about that story, of course, is that you can update to Drupal 9, and it really is an update. It's not a migration or replatform the way that it maybe was in the past. But there are still potentially some tricky bits, some gotchas, and there's a few things that the Drupal Association has been doing to try and support this and make this easier. So we'll talk first about the unsupported module adoption sort of project. Neil, I'll sort of let you talk about the issues that we've opened and kind of what we're doing there to help it make it possible to get some of the long tail of modules together. Go ahead.
Yeah, so when semantic versioning was like really introduced for contrib, we let modules decide what range of versions of core they're compatible with, since we no longer had the 7x or 8x or 6x prefix on module versions. And the kind of default, you should put this in your .info.yml file was, I am compatible with Drupal 8. But since there's not that much change of the code base from Drupal 8 to Drupal 9, just maybe some deprecations, hopefully. A lot of modules they don't need that much work. But there's, maintainers still need to show up and do that work. So we wanted to enable more maintainers, new maintainers to come in and take over modules to do that ongoing maintenance if it fell behind. So what the core maintainers had us do was open issues to kind of motivate the existing project adoption process. So if you're adopting a project, there's a 2-week window for the maintainers to respond. And after those couple weeks, then it gets escalated to the project applications queue for someone else to review it who is not one of the maintainers. So we kind of kickstarted this process a couple weeks ago, and I believe later this week those 2 weeks will be up. And if the maintainer hasn't responded, if they want to keep their module, of course they keep their module with no new maintainers. But this is opportunity for new maintainers to come in and take projects that seem to be abandoned.
Yeah, exactly. So we're kind of hoping that this long tail of modules will see some support. If you're out there in the audience right now and you're thinking, hey, I want to find some way to contribute to Drupal, maybe I'm interested in maintaining a module for the first time, and I'd like to co-maintain it maybe with existing maintainers, that's something that you can do. So we've opened these issues about 2 weeks ago, so that here at DrupalCon during the contribution days, you can work with folks from the maintainers team in general, or with others in the contribution area to find modules that you could adopt. Since opening issues on roughly these sort of 4,000 long tail modules, there are about, I think, 700 or so have been responded to, and we've seen positive action taken by maintainers. But there's definitely still some more that you can look at, and we'll drop in this link here, this bit.ly link, that you can use to find additional modules that are available for adoption, and just need probably a one-line patch to update them for Drupal 9. And together, hopefully this will help us get more folks ready for the Drupal 8 end of life next month and moved on to Drupal 9 with their personal sites. There's one other tool that we've used to make it easier for site owners to update and move forward into the Drupal 9 era. So I'll let Ryan talk about this a little bit. It's something that we're calling the lenient composer facade. So why don't you go ahead and explain what this is, Ryan?
Yeah, so normally site owners, when they had an issue with a module or something, they would use the Cameron Wiegand's Composer plugin called Composer Patches. And what it would do is download the module, you would apply the patch to fix what's wrong with it, and then be able to use that module or project on your site. Now, the problem with the compatibility being the issue, that, as you can see in this slide. Oh, well, can you go back a slide, Tim?
Yep.
As you can see in this slide here, the whole slice of yellow there, those are all projects where the only thing that needs to happen to this project to make it compatible with Drupal 9 is a one-line fix. And that just basically says it is compatible, even though it didn't say it was. And so there was this chicken and egg situation where you needed Composer to download the project to apply the patch to make it compatible, but Composer refused to do it because it wasn't compatible. And so in order to facilitate the ability of using Composer to download these projects, we've introduced this new lenient facade that basically says if a module doesn't explicitly declare itself to be Drupal 9 compatible with the core version requirement field that goes in the info YAML file, we'll assume that it's a project that needs additional maintenance or needs additional action, and add it to this lenient facade that allows Composer, that ignores the Drupal core requirement. It just drops it. It doesn't exist. So you could just Composer require any of these modules, and they will show up in your site. They still won't be Drupal. They still won't be compatible. You'll still need to run the patch to patch them to make them Drupal 9 compatible. But this alleviates a lot of the intermediate steps where people would have to add VCS repositories to their Composer JSON, for each individual project. This allows them to add just one Composer repository to their Drupal 9 site at one place. And from that point forward, as they're working with these other modules to get them, on board through either the application process or, get their site upgraded and then maybe remove these modules or replace them with something else that's in Drupal 9. But that's in a nutshell what it does.
Awesome. Fantastic. So as you see on the screen here, the sort of general instructions for the process that you need to follow if you have a Drupal 9 site and you've got one of these incompatible modules that really is compatible but just doesn't say so yet. Those instructions are posted up here. Again, if you do go to drupal.org/composer/lenient, you can see the specific step-by-step instructions for how to use this new additional facade. Again, it'll basically let you install these Drupal 8 only modules in Drupal 9. But again, you will still need to add any patches. It just makes it easier for you to do so in the event that you need to. So again, if you're here during kind of contribution opportunities, looking for help getting your site upgraded, maintaining a site for clients, these sorts of things, then we can go ahead and help you do that. I'm going to make a quick adjustment to captions. I've just seen a suggestion where I can move the captions to the top of the window. So I'm going to do that really quickly here. Rachel, in the meantime, could you remind folks that we have an alternating contribution schedule, right? So we've talked a couple times about people being able to do module adoption and or get help with site upgrades and things like that. Can you remind folks what that contribution schedule looks like throughout the week?
Yeah, so we have ability for everyone in the Drupal community to contribute to Drupal, join DrupalCon at any time, whether they have a ticket or not. So we actually have a separate website, drupalcontributions.opensocial.site, which I'm sure someone will post as a link in a moment. And then you can go into there and you will find that there is a specific Europe 2021 section. And there are some places, some tables, or for want of a better description in the system, that we call them topics. And what you'll find in there, thank you, Gabor and Ten, what you'll find in there is a whole bunch of topics or tables where you can find out what people are getting involved in terms of general contribution. And I believe that there is a table or a topic that is working on adopting modules and new maintainers for modules, people there to kind of help you get involved in that. This afternoon, I was going to say there's a first-time contributor workshop this afternoon for people new to contributions, and then there's a mentored contribution session on Thursday, my afternoon in Europe. I'm sure that would be still quite early in the morning in West Coast USA. With my colleagues, where we would have some mentors to help you get involved in contribution if that's new to you.
Awesome. So, okay, so moving on from the upcoming, Drupal 8 to Drupal 9 transition here in November, I'd like to talk about some Drupal initiatives. So not just Drupal.org initiatives, but things related to Drupal itself, to Drupal core, that the Drupal Association has been involved in. So increasingly over the past several years, as you've probably seen in some earlier editions of this post, if you followed along at our other recent virtual conferences, is an emphasis on ways that the association can support Drupal itself, and some projects where we've got additional funding from the board to make strategic investments in Drupal, and some places where, because Drupal needs sort of remote services to enable sort of new key features, the Drupal Association, as the maintainers of infrastructure, really need to be involved. So I'll run through a few of these. And again, as anyone has questions, feel free to use the Q&A section or chat with us. So one of these major areas is project messaging in core. So we're trying to build a system so that we can reach out to all the end users of Drupal directly in their admin interface, and link to blog posts, basically as a curated set, a curated feed specifically from Drupal.org. So that would look something like this. You see in the upper right corner of this screenshot from the in progress core issue, a sort of mock-up of the announcements icon and banner in the upper right corner. And that would sort of pop out a simple feed that's going to talk about, announcements that might be in the community. And these could be one or more, sort of a variety of announcements that might be anything from, hey, it's almost Drupal 8's end of life, to here's a initiative we want to acknowledge within the community, or here are some upcoming features of Drupal 10. Anything like that might go into this feed. I think most importantly, though, this lets us reach people who aren't sort of traditionally in our, let's say, the kind of active side of our community. So they're members of the Drupal community de facto, by nature of the fact that they do use Drupal every day. But maybe they're not plugged into Drupal Association newsletters, or maybe they don't follow the core blog, or things like that. And so this will let us reach them and get key messages to them about the project, about where the project is going, and maybe get them involved more directly in the community and contribution and in other parts of the project. So this core issue is open as we speak. There is a merge request that is active. We're getting lots of review from different core subsystem maintainers. The deadline for inclusion in Drupal 9.3's alpha phase is October 25th. So we've got 20 more days to get the last of the feedback from all of those stakeholders resolved, but it's coming together pretty well. And if you're curious about it, you can find the issue at that link on this slide. So that is an area where we've made an investment in a feature in partnership with Zixware, with QED42, with Lullabot for early designs, various folks in the community who've come together with us as the Drupal Association, and with some funding designated by the board of directors of the Drupal Association to try and make a key feature happen that'll let us reach out to users. We're hoping especially to even have this be one of the last things that gets backported to Drupal 7. So that long tail of users still on Drupal 7 through 2022 will actually let you will actually let us communicate with those folks and get them ready for their final switch over onto the Drupal 9 train and get on board. The next kind of initiative that we're regularly involved in is the Automatic Updates Initiative. So this is an area in which we act as initiative coordinators. I'm one of the initiative coordinators for the regular meetings that have been going on for a couple of years now, back from when the first version of this initiative began as a contributed module that worked in Drupal 7 that was sponsored by the European Commission, and up through current efforts to create the version of the module that would live in Drupal core, perhaps starting with Drupal 10's release. We'll see when that how that comes together and when that comes around. This is another place where, with the help of the Drupal Association board, we've made a strategic investment to get some help to help accelerate a key part of this process. One of the most important things about doing an automatic update system is securing the supply chain, right? You don't want to have automatically installed modules that come from an untrusted source and have the risk of accidentally installing something that's not what you intended to install. Malware, man-in-the-middle attack kind of stuff, anything like that. So with the help of Consensus Enterprises, we are working on implementing, quote, the update framework, also known as TOUGH, which is a Cloud Native Computing Foundation project that's used for secure package delivery. It's used in the automotive field for autonomous vehicles. It's used in a variety of other projects. And we worked together across open source projects to make a PHP version of TOUGH available. So this quite detailed diagram is an example of how projects, the sort of life cycle of a project works in terms of maintainers making changes and then a package being created and delivered. So basically you see a release getting created, it triggering the pipeline on the Drupal Association side, and a new step that's going to be included there that includes a signing oracle that creates a signature that can be verified of every package. And this is something that the auto updates module is going to implement to make sure that the updates you install are secure. But it's also going to be usable in other initiatives that we have coming up and that we're supporting as well. So one of those is actually the project browser initiative. It follows along very nicely from the automated updates initiative. And it was announced in the Dries note earlier this year at DrupalCon North America. And this is the idea to have a project browser and really a project installer built into Drupal. And there's been a lot of progress made by the community team that's focused on these efforts. So I'll show off a couple of their sort of prototypes that are in progress. So for example, this was Matt Grasmick's original working prototype. If you get involved in the project browser channel on Drupal Slack, you can, and the initiative meetings, you can actually see a dev environment where you can play around with this particular prototype. More recently, a prototype built with a sort of React front end was created by Jaya Sundaharm. And there's a number of other folks involved. Leslie Glenn, who's been in the chat today and is the community, one of the community elected members of our board, has been working to lead the site builder team of this initiative, because of course this is a feature that focuses on site builders, on their experience of using Drupal, on making their if they're new, making their introduction to Drupal an easier one, a more welcoming one, and helping to make Drupal more accessible to a bigger audience. So it's really, really cool. And that work that we're doing with securing the update pipeline will be directly relevant to securing the installation pipeline of a Drupal installer built into core as this progresses. So from there, we're going to switch from directly Drupal-related initiatives to Drupal.org features. So things specific to Drupal.org that might be collaboration features, that might be related to our contribution recognition system, all of those things that make the home of our community what it is, that enable our community to contribute and collaborate the way that they do. And hopefully these are things that if you're not using them already, you will be able to use, and that will enhance your experience in our community. So I want to start off with contribution recognition and with some elements of this. So Rachel, I'm going to ask you to speak to this again, because the core of the newest feature that we've added comes from something that you worked together with several community members to help put together. So this is the contribution role browser, basically. I'll go to a screenshot here of this page in the community section of Drupal.org. Rachel, can you talk about what this is and how it came about?
Yeah, so the whole idea of having a documentation, rather than just documentation about Drupal, but documentation about the Drupal community and how it collaborates and how it works is hugely important, because it helps us expose all of the amazing work that people do. Like any community, the Drupal community is made up of people doing individual pieces of work, They could be tasks and issues, but also it involves people taking on long-term or reasonably long-term roles, like Drupal core contribution mentor or Drupal core contribution mentor lead. People who are coordinating others, people who are helping each other on a regular basis. And what we wanted to do is start to develop a way of documenting those, not just what the role is, but also what tasks are involved, because if you're working as a mentor or a mentor lead, then you would have various different tasks that you perform, and we need to document those, but also what skills are needed to perform that role and what skills you might learn and improve whilst performing that role. The long-term idea of this is eventually people can say, hey, I'm involved as a contribution mentor, and maybe we notice over a year or two that someone's been doing a particular role. Now, we always want to make sure people are doing things because they enjoy doing them. So being able to continue growing within the community is really important. So if we can get to the situation where we can say, hey, if you've been doing this role for a while and learned all these skills here, maybe you can then think about taking on this other role because you have now got that knowledge of what you can do. It really helps us continue all to grow and stay interested in contribution to Drupal and the community.
Exactly. One thing I would add is that as you're going into the contribution areas, as we've talked about earlier, this might also be a good thing to look at if you're not sure where to contribute, because there's a code contribution, documentation contribution, event organizing contribution, being part of the Promote Drupal team, all of these roles that have been submitted and defined by the community. And I want to give a shout out to Jennifer Hodgson in particular, who did a ton of work around this as well, but others in the community have contributed quite a bit. And one of the things that's exciting about this is a new feature we created based on this. So I'll let Brendan talk about this a little bit, but here's a quick screenshot of something you can now do on your user profile. So Brendan, do you want to talk about what we've done with this?
Sure. So, hopefully this feature kind of brings non-code contribution and code contribution, I suppose, and helps make it more forward in the importance stack of things we do here on Drupal.org and in the community itself. You can go and select, as this animated screenshot is showing us, roles that you fulfill in the community. You can tell us when you started, when you stopped, and all of that. And this kind of rolls up now into other places. So if your organization is sponsoring your ability to do this, as you're seeing here on Neil's profile, your organization can be credited. Those fields that you filled out show up on your organization in kind of a timeline, or sorry, on your profile in a timeline, and then also on your organization pages, as you're seeing here as well. Eventually, this will roll up into other places on Drupal.org, like the marketplace and things like that. But this was kind of the first step in a way to reward both organizations and people for doing some of these, these high ask roles within the community that are so important for making the community what it is.
Exactly. So, and one of the things we say quite often when it comes to contribution to the community is that what we want to do is we want to recognize everything that everyone does. Credit is about, particularly for individuals, is about recognition rather than ranking. But when we do have to find the place to rank things like our organizations in order to provide order to our marketplace, what we want to do is do that based on the complete picture of how both organizations and individuals at those organizations contribute to the Drupal project. So again, if you haven't done this so far, I'd really encourage you to go to your user profile, edit your profile. You'll find a new section about halfway down in sort of the vertical tabs of all your user information that lets you add these roles, attribute them to an employer or client who sponsors that role on your behalf. And that'll help us get a big picture of what all these roles are that people have been holding down and fulfilling for the community. Help us understand the community better and what roles are needed to make our community function. And eventually recruit more folks into those, and level people up into other roles and other positions that they might be interested in. So we're really proud of this feature. It's going to be the basis of a lot of really cool things that we can do in the future. So continuing on, I want to briefly make mention of contribution recognition as it will affect GitLab and our GitLab acceleration project. So as you may know, again, from the Dries note at the virtual DrupalCon North America, one of the major initiatives that we're tasked with is accelerating the transition of contribution and collaboration tools for the Drupal project further into GitLab. So we've already got a lot of things integrated in terms of, our GitLab instance, self-hosted instance that we control, is already sort of taken over all of the backend repository hosting. You can use code viewing. You can use the web IDE. There's been, I think, 10,000 merge requests opened since November, so in less than a year, using the merge request integration with existing Drupal.org issues. But there's more work to be done, and this is going to be talked about a little bit in my section of the Dries note tomorrow, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about, in the strategic initiatives keynote on Thursday, how we're going to handle the issue credit side specifically if we start moving from Drupal.org issues to GitLab issues. So just as a quick sneak preview, if you join that initiative keynote on Thursday, I'll be talking about 2 paths that we could take to move in that direction to help keep a contribution recognition system with our issues, depending on where they live, as we move forward with the GitLab acceleration. So another thing that I wanted to give a shout out to, related to contribution enablement, related to the GitLab project, and related to the way that we work together with community members, is an emerging fully online remote development tool. And so all credit here really goes to Ofer Shal in the community for spearheading the Drupalpod project and initiative. I'll talk a little bit about what this is and how we can use it, and how we're collaborating on this. But basically, the short version is Drupalpod, which is based on Gitpod.io, creates a fully remote virtual sort of machine environment that pre-installs Drupal, uses DDev to give you all the command line tools you need, allows you to commit directly and make your changes. So it's perfect for onboarding new contributors. It's a great tool for folks who don't have super powerful machines and just want to use it for their regular contribution and work, and all sorts of things. And it's brand new. It's really exciting. There's a lot to it. So I'll step through a few things here. So one is, Neil, real quick, could you mention just some integration stuff that we've been doing recently to help make this even easier to use?
So yeah, in the last maybe a few months at this point, or at least a few weeks, we opened up another user preference page on git.drupalcode.org. So you can like enable a dark theme, change the color of your header, and enable Gitpod integration. Since Gitpod's a third-party service, there's a little bit of an opt-in process. You have to sign up with them, but they have an ample amount of free minutes for open source developers.
Yeah, it's really cool. And they're we've had some initial conversations with them, and they're really interested in being a part of the Drupal community and the Drupal project. They're also sort of closely in partnership with GitLab itself. So it makes a lot of sense to use a tool that takes advantage of that kind of third-party integration we're building. You'll see when you have that checkbox marked that you have the option to open edit any file directly in Gitpod, which is one of the ways that you can use this. But I think much more interestingly and much more importantly is Official's specific Drupalpod sort of integration tool. So Drupalpod exists right now as a browser extension. It's available in Chrome. I think there may be a Firefox version available already as well. I don't totally remember. But it installs to your toolbar and allows you to look at any issue on Drupal.org, particularly anyone that might have a merge request already open, and say it sort of scans that issue page, figures out what project you're working on, lets you select a branch that you would like for your remote development environment, what core version you would like installed, and lets you open that development environment. So once you get in there, it looks something like this, which is maybe a little bit intimidating at first, but basically what you can see in sort of the bottom section is it provides a terminal console where you can run your DDEV and Drush commands on this site installation. On the left is a full sort of IDE browser with debugging tools and things like that. I think VS Code is sort of the default. There's a work in progress for a remote PHP Storm equivalent that would also be integrated. And of course, there's a live preview of all the changes that you're making to the site. So it really has every end-to-end component that you need for contribution. And as Rachel has just put in chat, this is now being used this week with new contributors, first-time contributors, to help them get ready for contributing to Drupal. This means no more setting up your local development environments on your laptops. This means saving hours and hours of time and getting people directly from, hey, I want to make a contribution, into the tools they need to do so. So yes, and as Rachel puts, hopefully means when we're back in regular convention centers that everybody downloading a bunch of local tools won't have to bring down our Wi-Fi anymore. So that'll be good as well. You can learn more at drupalpod.com, which will redirect you to where to get that browser extension. But it should be a pretty straightforward process. And again, we're looking at making it even easier to get this set up, although it's already been working and been used by a lot of contributors so far throughout the community. So again, a lot of credit to Ofer Shal and to some others who have been supporting him with this initiative. And we're happy just to do our part in making sure that it can integrate with our own GitLab instance. So a little bit more about GitLab progress and plans. So I told you earlier that there's going to be some of the update in the Dries note and in the keynote, the initiative's keynote, talking about contribution preservation. But I do want to talk about a few other things that are coming up or works in progress. So maintainer control documentation is one element, one sort of part of this system that's kind of important. So Narayan Newton, who's part of the Tag One team that supports Drupal.org infrastructure, helped enable this feature in sort of a beta format. It still has some rough edges we're polishing. But Ryan, since you were also working on this, can you explain what this is and what it's for and why we're kind of turning on this feature for the community?
Yes. The GitLab Pages is a feature that allows, similar to how GitLab Pages is a feature similar to how GitHub allows you to host static sites on your GitHub repository. This will allow people to host static sites on Drupal.org's GitLab instance. And that's really valuable when a maintainer wants to develop their own documentation using a documentation generator. And what this basically allows people to do is the new JavaScript Once project is going to host their documentation on this. It's essentially a new service for us to be able to do this. Now, it's taken us a long time to get it going, and that's basically because in the background we're like, well, we need to be able to do this on staging, and then we ran into a lot of issues with the way GitLab was doing their backups, and it's been a long, arduous process just to get to the point where we can actually try it and turn it on. So we're really happy to be able to have this enabled now.
Yeah. So as you can see, if you add a GitLab CI.yaml file to your project that lets you configure things related to using GitLab pipelines, there's a section in here that we just put in as an example on the general example project on Drupal.org that shows what it would look like to use a particular static site, static documentation generator. But a variety of them work. You can use things like Hugo. You can use kind of any sort of static generator.
And
now,
I was going to interject. We haven't enabled this for all projects yet. It's only the general projects, and we still need to enable CI for those as well. So
yes, absolutely. So this is sort of a beta preview of something that we're actually further than I was expecting to be as of DrupalCon, because we managed to get a good chunk done this past week. But we're hoping that the Decoupled Menus Initiative team can use this and help us use it to refine those like rough edges that I was talking about to get it working. But basically, you define a few steps in your YAML file, you set up your pipelines, and then you can publish using whatever tool it is. In this case, the Jupyter generator. You can publish documentation or things like that. Now, in my mind, we're envisioning this to be used by maintainers to create their kind of contributor specific or developer specific documentation. So this is something that's that would be good for documenting a module's APIs, for documenting sort of, in this case of JavaScript stuff, how you might do NPM dependency management, or what other JavaScript components you might use together with your component, things like that. At the same time, Drupal.org already has extensive tools for collaboratively edited wiki-style documentation, which I still see as being core to the kind of end-user documentation, how-to documentation throughout Drupal.org. So while we'll see some projects doing sort of independent documentation of the sort of highly technical parts of their projects, or for new contributors or developers, I think we'll still see end-user documentation using Drupal.org system. There's even a possibility that we might consider using a sort of PHP docs generator to use a version of this for api.drupal.org, which is something where we've built a similar sort of API parsing tool to create what exists as api.drupal.org. And while we're not sure we'll go this route, we now have the possibility of using this kind of tool. So that is looking like something great that we can do. So let's see here. Next on our list is talking about Federated Login. So this is a feature that semi-tragically we've been talking about for a couple of years now, but it's because it's a big, important feature and it's actually not easy to implement. But one of the things that is, again, an initiative that has gotten strategic support from the Drupal Association board specifically is for a federated identity of Drupal.org that would let you create an account or sign in using the existing GitHub, GitLab, maybe other things like Atlassian or Google. That would get you your first-party identity on Drupal.org and all the subsites and git.drupalcode.org, but also could be used to be opened up to third-party sites, camp websites. The logo I dropped in isn't rendering, or things like the Drupal Slack or other chat services and things like that. So we've got funding behind this. We're working with partners to try and figure out exactly what the strategy is going to be to do this, but hoping that this will be something that's finally on that roadmap coming soon in the next little while. And here again is a little bit of an update. We're running out of time. We're in sort of the last minute here. I see Neil answering a couple of the questions here. So just real quick in the Q&A, one of the questions was, is Drupalpod in the first-time contributor workshop? The answer is yes. Hearing about Gitpod and Drupalpod, how does it hold up compared to your thoroughly tested local setup? You're not necessarily missing out. If you have a really strongly built local environment, you probably have a very similar tool set. It's just that this helps kickstart someone without having to figure that all out on their own. So hope that answers your question, Niels. So then real quickly, running us through, because we're about to be over time. Another thing we're doing as part of the GitLab migration is we know that there's a lot of stakeholders, whether they're security team members, contrib maintainers, core maintainers, documentation editors, all sorts of people who use Drupal.org issues and Drupal.org to do everything they do to make Drupal happen. So we've been doing a very thorough audit of user stories, and we'll continue to do user stories and stakeholder interviews to make sure that as we move forward with the GitLab Acceleration Project, we know all of the use cases, and we know all the choices that we're making and the trade-offs we're making, and we do so deliberately to make sure we don't disrupt the way the community collaborates as these tools begin to change. So if you want to get involved, you can join us in Drupal.org/join Slack, and then the GitLab channel, and the plan issue is posted there. So I would switch over again to Q&A at this point, but we've actually pretty much used all our time, and I think we've managed to answer the question and answer section of this as we go. So I will wrap things up. If you are interested in learning more about some other things we're doing, like the Drupal Steward Security Program, we're going to have a sort of mini session in our booth on Thursday at 4 o'clock Central European Time, 7 o'clock a.m. Pacific Time on Thursday, 7th of October. And with that, I will just say, I hope you do join the contributions. We've talked about them several times throughout this presentation. It's a great way to get involved. There's awesome new tools. There's the opportunity to help bring Drupal 8 modules to Drupal 9. It's a wonderful time to get involved, and a great opportunity for new mentors, for new contributors, and new people to step into leadership roles in the community. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you all throughout the conference, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.